And welcome. This is Dr. Greg Cason. You are on Off the Couch with Dr. Greg, and I am here with producer Brian Gomez.
Happy Monday, you guys.
And on the board is Gus. Say hi, Gus.
Hi.
Hey, Gus. It's good to have you here. So today on Off the Couch, we're going to do, if two people are talking, are you the a-hole? If you're one of the two people, whose relationship is happier, swipers or abstainers, the people that use the apps or not, how bullying really screws people up, and do LGBTQ bills lead to more suicides? The facts will not surprise you. And in Psychology in the News, Greece bucks the church and improves the mental health of a nation. But first, Brian, did you see the Kansas City Super Bowl? Did you go to the Super Bowl? Did you watch the Super Bowl?
No, I was so bad. So I went to Big Bear that weekend, and I was literally driving back while the Super Bowl was starting, and I had so much stuff to do that I was like, no, I'm giving up.
Did you watch the Super Bowl, Gus?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, good. Well, what happened?
Wait, you didn't watch it?
The Chiefs won. It was unfortunate, though.
So you were the other guys. You wanted the other guy.
They want any team but the Chiefs.
Any team but the Chiefs. Well, right on. But yeah, you know, the Super Bowl was really a big mass event. People were super excited about it. Of course, we've talked about it here already. But then the Kansas City Super Bowl celebration happened in Kansas City, and they had a mass shooting. This is really unfortunate. So during their parade celebration, one person was killed and 22 people were injured. The victims range from ages 8 to 47, and half of the victims were under 16 years old. And two teenagers currently are being held for the shooting. And there were, believe it or not, 800 police officers on site. 800 were just strewn about. And nobody, was able to stop this. The suspects were tackled by some unarmed onlookers, or at least they didn't present arms. So we always hear this saying that, the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And just it continues to happen that isn't what took place. The good guys with a gun were just nowhere around, and I think that happens too much. What Missouri is missing, the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence, you might know the name Giffords. It's Gabby Giffords, who was a politician who was shot in the face in Arizona, and she started this law center to prevent gun violence. And they rank Missouri's gun laws with a scorecard of F. And let's talk about why that might be. They do not require universal background checks. There is no gun owner licensing. They don't have extreme risk protection orders. There is no domestic violence gun laws. There's no assault weapons restrictions, no large capacity magazine bans, no waiting periods, no concealed carry permits. Do you love that? In fact, you can apply for a concealed carry permit, and they might even give you one, because they do still do that, but you don't need one. It's just for fun, I guess. And then they don't have community violence intervention funding. And although people over 18 are under 18, are not allowed to purchase a weapon, they can possess a weapon. How about that?
Wait, under 18 you can have one?
You can you can have a weapon, you just can't purchase one. So this is two teenagers. I mean, who knows what happened? We're going to find out hopefully soon, probably in an altercation, who knows? And hopefully it was something that we can all kind of understand, but right now it doesn't seem like anything we can understand. That was a day of joy and celebration, and it just is really sad what happened. And why I'm even bringing this up on a mental health show is because mental health is continually brought up as the first line of defense that a lot of people want in stopping gun violence. But I'm going to tell you why that may not be the best idea. Mental health we look for things in assessing dangerousness. And just a fun fact about me is that when I worked at the VA years ago, one of my jobs was I called all these big researchers. We were trying to get to the bottom of how to assess dangerousness. And everyone gave me ideas, and, there are people who've developed instruments, and there are all kinds of different things. But every single top researcher I talked to said the same thing. Ultimately, we can never really be able to say who's going to be violent and who isn't. That's because it's often a very impulsive act that happens. But let's just talk about what we do look for. Kind of generally, when someone comes in, we look at their substance use, we look at their mental and emotional issues. We also look at life stressors. Did they have a recent divorce or firing or something like that? We also look to dangerousness to themselves and to others, or history of that. Have they tried to do something in the past? Are they thinking about doing something in the future? Do they have any kind of activity that they've done to themselves or others? Then we look at their current ideation. We look at threats. We look at gestures. We look at rehearsals, and we look at attempts. So we try to escalate the threat. We try to see how bad it might be. And if there is ideation or greater, we look for intention. We look for weapons, means, and we look for a plan. So we're doing all of this. But to get that kind of information, what do you think is required? What do you think, Brian, to just get that kind of information from somebody?
Well, that seems like a lot of work. Yeah, I don't know, unless you're in therapy voluntarily.
Exactly. I mean, people don't just appear on your doorstep willing to give all this information.
Even in therapy, I think it would be hard to pry all that out.
Even in therapy, it can be very hard, and people are often very reluctant. And even when I've had the very, very few times it's happened over my entire career, when it has happened that I've come across somebody who has crossed the threshold where we need to report them or to, get them into a hospital, get them into an ER. Sometimes they'll get all the way to the ER, and the ER will turn them down because the person figures out, if I now switch my story and say I'm not planning on hurting anyone, there then becomes no reason to keep them. So I think it's just a very, very imperfect system. It requires a lot of trust. It requires that the person be in front of us. It requires that we be able to access a great deal of information. So sometimes mental health professionals can get it wrong, but most of the time, they're just not even there to begin with. Also, a lot of these killings, like perhaps the one that happened with the Kansas City Chiefs parade, it can be rather impulsive. The Kansas City Chiefs didn't have anything to do with it. They're just a football team. The parade that happened there, it can be impulsive. And right now, I looked up this statistics. I couldn't believe it. Right now, there are more guns than people in the United States. There are exactly 120.5 guns for every 100 people in the United States.
And I'm pretty sure that we know of. It's not.
That we know of.
Yeah.
That we know of. And it's really, those guns are held by a minority of people because most people don't have guns. So it's kind of interesting that there are that many guns floating around with just a few people out there. Well, I mean, a significant number of a few people, but a lot of people. Okay, so why was that a mental health issue? Because we all need to think differently about this. The fact that guns they're probably the thing that is the biggest dangerousness quota there. If the person were trying to kill people with a knife, we probably wouldn't see the level of damage that was done. So when we look at other countries from around the nation, we just don't see the same kinds of statistics. So I continually get upset when people try to say, it's a mental health issue. Yeah, that could be the case, that's part of the situation, but that is not the entire picture. Mental health actually is just one piece of this puzzle. But the thing that people use to kill other people is probably, at least here, probably the biggest piece of all. Okay, so now let's talk about this study that I just thought was so fun, because it's Are You the A-hole? And that is basically, Brian, I want you to picture this. Gus, too. You are talking with a friend and know a secret about a mutual acquaintance that you're burning to share. You just want to tell this gossip. You know a secret you are burning to share. What do you do? Gus, what do you do?
Probably keep it to myself.
Keep it to yourself? What about you, Brian?
Is it my best friend?
I don't know.
Is it my best friend I'm talking to?
I don't know.
If it is, then it's a safe space. So I might say something.
Well, new research out of George Mason University College of Business, co-authored with researchers from Vanderbilt University and the University of Pennsylvania, and published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, say that all in one breath, reveals that if you tell, that is you, Brian, it will make you look bad in the eyes of observers, even when the observers say that it's the right thing to do.
That makes sense.
You're off the hook there, Gus. You did well. This actually, they did a rather clever study. I really like this. They took data from Reddit, a Reddit forum called Am I the A-hole? And then they went through it, and they took 332 posts from 2020 and 2021, to those 2 years, that addressed moral dilemmas people put around revealing secrets about somebody else. The researchers found that Reddit users deemed secret sharers to be the a-holes if their perceived obligation to the person the secret was about outweighed their obligation to the potential audience. Wow, that's a twisted sentence. That means is that if you made a promise not to tell, or if your allegiance is really important, or if that person's information is very personal, that it doesn't matter if the other person might want to know. So how about that? So thus, reporting a coworker's wrongdoing to a manager is less problematic than telling personal details about a friend, even to a random stranger. So when it's a boss who's asking, people won't hold you. They're not as bad about it, but the study was still kind of wishy about that, and they looked at some more stuff. This is interesting. It was done by a college of business, because keeping secrets in the workplace is kind of a big deal. And when one coworker goes home early and the other ones are kind of pissed about it, but then the boss comes and says, "Where's so-and-so?" And then the other ones are standing there going, "Do I say or do I not say?"
There's always somebody. There's always that one
There's
person
always
that's going to
one.
say it.
Yes. So researchers surveyed 200 people on secrets they knew about others and why they chose or did not choose to tell information about other people. This ranged from things like marital infidelity, criminal behavior. Most opted not to tell, less based on a moral obligation than their belief that others would judge them negatively for disclosing. So they weren't being moral. They just didn't want to be seen as a-holes, excuse me. How about that? Then they surveyed another 200 people, and they did a hypothetical situation. Employees decide to tell either their manager about a colleague leaving work early without permission, or keep quiet about it. And though the tattletale was judged more moral and honest, they were ultimately still viewed negatively. So here's the lesson. He's like, don't say anything. Keep secrets.
It's like we've been watching Feud.
Yeah.
And Truman, hi.
Oh, okay. So let's expand that. There's a show called Feud. What is it? Something about the Swans or something?
I thought it was just Feud, but something, yeah.
Feud, second season, Attack of the Swans. I don't know. Anyway, there's a bunch of women. It's a true story. Truman Capote wrote In Cold Blood, blah, blah, blah. Then he didn't have anything to write, and he was kind of spiraling. So he decided to write about all these wealthy women and their lives, and what are the lives of these uber wealthy sort of society women, and like their dirty laundry. And he aired it, and that became a big, big scandal. So actually, it's a very good story, I think. It's a real story, too.
It's really like, yeah, entertaining for sure. I'm hooked.
So even when secret sharing is perceived as honest and moral, it's good to keep the secret. And then keeping the secret is the behavior that yields a more favorable impression. This is interesting to me too, because I have to keep secrets for a living. But that's usually not too hard, because it's not like I know they're friends or anything, but you just get used to keeping secrets. But nonetheless, it's kind of an interesting thing. Before asking someone to disclose another person's secret, so don't put pressure on someone to disclose someone else's secret, because then they're basically pressuring you into being the a-hole. How about that?
Taking notes. I'm taking notes.
Okay, now, do you guys use, what? You don't have to tell me, because this is ultra too personal, so I take it back. But people who use dating apps, people who swipe and people who don't swipe. So the new study by Radboud University in the Netherlands, I know I said that incorrectly, but there you go, and it's published in Mobile Media and Communication. They reported here that people who use dating apps like Tinder actually tend to be less satisfied with their relationship status than the people who don't. Isn't that a little wild? So the people who don't use dating apps are a much happier brood.
That makes kind of sense.
How does it make sense? What do you think?
I think the dating apps can get a little toxic in the same way that social media can get toxic. So I think if people aren't using social media as much, or, aren't using the apps as much, real life is kind of nice.
Real life is nice. I found that to myself. So previous research has shown mobile dating apps negatively affect people's self-esteem and make them feel more anxious about being single. So this study actually took 1,000 American and British people ages 18 to 34. Those are the big users. And half of them had never used a mobile dating app, and the other half were using dating apps at the time of the study. So they get these two groups, and both groups included singles as well as people in relationships. So it wasn't like the people on the dating apps were out, cruising for bruising, and the people, were, satisfied to be at home. So they were just a big mix of people. And the people who used mobile dating apps scored lower on satisfaction with their relationship status than non-users. That's whether they were single or married. Oh. So how about that? So why might this be the reason? So the theory is that apps are always available, number one. How about that? So, it's like nothing special. There's a pool of potential partners is huge, and people feel more pressured to find someone else. So you're looking at it and going, oh my God, I need to find somebody. Everyone's out there, and what if I miss this one, or this guy, this person, that, whatever. But it could also be, there's another theory, the people who are already not happy with being single or in a relationship use dating apps more. So it could be a little bit of both. I think it might be a little bit of both, because maybe you're unhappy and you turn to the dating apps because you don't know what else to do, and that's a pool, that's a bar of sorts you can go to, and you can just check out from the convenience of your car or bedroom. And then, you look at all these things, and then you start to compare yourself to other people, and then people might be rejecting and this and that, and you just start to feel worse about yourself. So, and then there could be too much choice, and you're just looking at two-dimensional representations of people. So it's just not always as attractive as it could be. No? Yes? So women versus men. Let's talk about women. Women were found significantly less satisfied with their love life than those who did not use mobile dating apps. So when women are on mobile dating apps, they generally are doing that comparison thing. This is not good, and it might feel very poorly about themselves. Previous research has shown that women may use dating apps to look for a steady relationship. Guess what men tend to look for? Yeah, not a steady relationship. Men tend to look for entertainment, including casual sex. So I just have to say,
There you go.
caveat emptor, the Latin phrase, let the buyer beware. If you're going to be on those, know what you're getting, folks.
And that's why they're so let down. I don't blame them, you know?
So just to follow through on more depressing, this one is how bullying really screws people up. And I couldn't help but have to address bullying yet again because there were 3 great studies that came out this week about bullying. And bullying is just one of those experiences that so many people have experienced. As someone who does therapy, I can tell you, you would be surprised how many people were bullied as kids. And it's still a trauma they lived with today. Even though they might have very functional, they might have good jobs, they might have, everything in their life kind of it looks okay, but they're still suffering from that trauma, and it can be rather profound. So this is a new study co-led by UCLA Health, actually where I'm an employee, UCLA Health and University of Glasgow in England, in the UK. And they found that young teenagers who develop a strong distrust of other people as a result of childhood bullying. So teenagers, it seems a little complicated to me, but this is basically the finding. Teenagers who develop a distrust of other people, so teenagers are already sort of surly usually, and if they develop a big distrust of other people as a result of childhood bullying, they're substantially more likely to have significant mental health problems when they enter adulthood. So think about it. Teenager, distrusting because they were bullied as a kid. When they become an adult, they're going to have mental health problems. Interesting? No,
it makes sense. It makes sense. You're a kid. You really shouldn't be getting attacked just by, when you're growing up. So.
This was an interesting study to me because compared to those who do not develop, when they compared it to people who were bullied but didn't develop interpersonal trust issues. And so if you didn't develop the interpersonal trust issues, it seemed like that was the very thing that didn't really cause the same mental health issues. This was a journal published. This study was published in the journal Nature Mental Health. Excuse me. Again, on our YouTube page, we have the links to all of these studies, so you can go check it out for yourself. It's believed to be the first study to examine the link between bullying, interpersonal distrust, and the development of mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, hyperactivity, and anger. Let me talk about the study really quickly because you'll be blown away by how extensive this was. The data was from a 10,000 child study in the United Kingdom. They were studied over 2 decades as part of the Millennium Cohort Study. So over 2 decades, 20 years, adolescents who were bullied at age 11 developed greater interpersonal distrust by age 14. And then they were 3.5 times more likely to experience clinically significant mental health issues at age 17 compared to those who did not develop mistrust or the distrust by age 14. How about that?
It's crazy. And it sucks because you see a lot of kids right now already dealing with a lot of mental health issues. And I feel like the whole bullying and cyberbullying isn't helping at all. That I can only imagine what this young generation is going to go through as an actual adult.
Well, to underline your point, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, we often call them, found that 44.2% of high school students report being depressed at least 2 weeks in 2021. So just so you know, major depression requires a 2-week period of depression. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And 1 in 10 reported attempted suicide. 1 in 10 of high school students. That is trippy to me.
That's crazy. That's scary.
Yeah.
That's really scary.
Yeah, it is scary, and I think something we need to pay attention to. Now, it was during the pandemic, 2021. That was a tough year for everybody, but so we'll just continue to have to watch these statistics. The authors of the distrust study also looked at things like diet, sleep, and physical activity. I'm so glad they did this because when we look at mental health issues, we do need to also consider diet, sleep, and physical activity. But they found that diet, sleep, and physical activity were not linked to the mental health problems. It was when someone was bullied. It was only the distrust issue with the bullying that led to the development of the mental health problems. Isn't that interesting? So this goes to something called the social safety theory. So let's talk about with that. Social threats such as bullying impact mental health partly by instilling the belief that other people cannot be trusted, that the world is an unfriendly, dangerous, and unpredictable place, and bullying leads to distrust and in turn mental health problems in late adolescence. Okay, another study. This is another study with bullied teens. University of Tokyo's International Research Center for Neurointelligence found adolescents being bullied by their peers. This is adolescents now, not children. Being bullied by their peers are at a greater risk of early stages of psychotic episodes. And they experience lower levels of a key neurotransmitter in the part of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC, that it's involved in regulating emotions. This was published in Molecular Psychiatry. But why is this important? Because regulating emotions is probably one of the key skills that we can use in helping us to navigate mental health issues, especially things like depression, anxiety, anger, that if we can regulate our emotions, we can keep from getting too overheated, we can help ourselves through serious problems, we can push through anxiety episodes to help us not to avoid or not to freeze in place, but to actually go forward and be more assertive. So regulating emotions is a very, very key skill. But if we're not going to have, we're going to have lower levels of a neurotransmitter that's needed to help us to do that, things are going to be much more difficult. So symptoms that these teenagers have, it can include hallucinations, paranoia, radical alterations in thinking or behavior, even in the absence of a psychotic disorder. And this was really concerning to me because, but I thought, what could be the biological purpose? Because in a way, it's somebody is dysregulated because their world is completely on fire. They're being picked on, they're being threatened, and probably it's happening within their school. This is peer bullying. It's within their school, it's within their church, it's on the way home, it's, maybe friends of friends, who knows? But it could be somebody in their life that's really creating the biggest issues. And then there was a third bullying study that the youth who share similar social positions of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender have much greater levels of emotional distress if they have experienced bias-based bullying. What's bias-based bullying? That is racist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, transphobic, misogynistic bullying. How about that? So this is the University of Minnesota Medical School, published in the journal Pediatrics, and analyzed 2019 Minnesota student survey data on more than 80,000 students in grades 9 and 11. And if you belong to a similar social group, but no bullying is based on who you are, then you have 60% less emotional distress. So it's basically that if you're bullied based on who you are in your group, you're going to feel much, much worse. How about that? It's really, there's just nothing good about being bullied. I don't know.
As an adult either.
And what's so interesting to me about that whole bullying thing is the instability and the fear it instills people about their world. And I can't help but think that there are television networks and programs that just instill fear in people constantly. And I wonder if that also leads to some of those same psychotic, after effects, or the same instability or mental health problems. It just kind of is interesting to me because people are maybe not bullying at you, but they're continually telling you the world is unsafe in much the same way someone who's bullied experiences in real life. So, okay, well, this takes us to how do anti-LGBT bills affect people. See, I told you this is a tough show, huh? Because we're going through a lot of difficult things. This is a study by Lehigh University College of Business, and that's in Pennsylvania. The analysis was done by Professor Chad Meyerhofer, along with University of New Hampshire and the Polish National Institute of Public Health, and this was a working paper published by the National Bureau of Economic Research. Do you know what a working paper is, Brian?
Nope. No.
Working paper. This is great. Working papers are these papers that are pre-publication research, and they're put out by like an institute, or they're put out by research organizations, and they're put out in some ways to start the conversation, to get feedback, to get people's thoughts. It's a way to air out some of the research to people out there, and working papers can be actually a great source of knowledge. Now, when it advances to a peer-reviewed journal, which is usually what I'm talking about in here. It's already gone through a team of people, and it's gotten pared down quite a bit, and it's got to be in a publication format, et cetera, et cetera. But working papers can be a little more free form, and they can have a lot more material inside of them, so they can be actually kind of cool. And this is a working paper, and he found that suicide attempts increased 16% in Poland after the enactment of anti-LGBT statutes. So suicide attempts increased 16%. So let's talk about that. It was in the LGBT community, Suicides also increased among middle-aged men. There were 11 additional suicides per 100,000 aged 30 to 49. And in areas that did not enact anti-LGBT policies. How about that? Even in areas where there were not anti-LGBT policies, suicide rates still went up. So why might this be? Well, there's social stigma. Whether legislation is enacted or not, social stigma leads to individuals already suffering from mental health problems, like most people who are oppressed groups, to suffer even more. They feel more stress, more feelings of isolation, and more hostility. This goes to the minority stress model. Remember the minority stress model that when you belong to a discriminated group, or you have more of a stigmatized group that you belong to, the LGBTQ population, racial ethnicity, we could talk about a lot of different groups right now that might fit into this. But when you're a member of one of these groups, it places you at a risk for more negative physical and emotional mental health problems, because basically you're a member of this group, you feel more stigma, so you have less support from the wider community, and then that causes you to feel more mental and emotional problems as well as physical outcomes.
Would this be kind of like the bias-based bullying that you were covering?
It was a little bit. It just is exactly the same, isn't it? I mean, really, these things they line up very neatly. And so, when you feel like you're being pushed for who you are, that who you are is wrong, that can really do a number on people's heads.
And it's the threat pretty much of the bills and everything, just as a bully would be doing.
It's the threat. So the Polish bills were published by the Law and Justice Party in Poland. I wasn't following Polish politics, so this was a little bit new to me, but it's a little bit fascinating because of the parallels in the United States. And that was the point of this working paper, is to point out the parallels in the United States. So the right-wing populist party promoted family values, that's the in quotes, that gained a parliamentary majority in 2015 and held power until the voters elected a more moderate majority just this last December 2023. So for that 8 or so years, there was a very conservative right-wing populist party in charge of parliament. And though they were not able to enact national level legislation as much, the anti-LGBT sentiment gain more traction at the local levels, and especially in politically conservative communities and low levels of socioeconomic status. That is remarkably similar to what's happening right now in the United States. So, sound familiar? They denounced homosexuality and sex education in schools. They focused on parental controls. They called them parental rights. They appointed a family ombudsman tasked with protecting family rights. So this would be like a person that you could turn to help navigate and get what you want. and also created LGBT-free zones. I'm sorry to laugh.
Oh my God,
How do you know?
Laugh. Sorry, that's wow.
So this is anticipating the effect of these bathroom bills here in the U.S. That was the point of this working paper. Despite evidence that same-sex marriage laws and similar non-discrimination policies increase the well-being of LGBT people and created economic wealth, there's a growing backlash from conservative political groups against the expansion of LGBT rights. Just watch YouTube. Like, it's kind of funny sometimes what people say, you know? So there's some pretty very distinct attitudes out there, let's just say, that are anti-LGBTQ. So, other countries that criminalize same-sex sexual acts and sentences up to the death penalty: Uganda, Brunei, Iran, Mauritania, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Northern Algeria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Qatar, Somalia, and the UAE, or United Arab Emirates. So, they're in good news. But there is, they're in good company is what I meant to say, but there is good news. There's good news because Greece, this probably passed everyone, but I happened to see it in the New York Times, so I thought, you know what? This just sort of puts a positive cap on the whole thing. Greece becomes the first Orthodox country to legalize same-sex marriage. How about that? Do you know what an Orthodox country is? It's a religiously conservative country that follows this. I'm sure I'm saying this wrong. So there was when Christianity split, they split like Catholic and they went Orthodox, and Greek Orthodox is sort of its own thing, and it's a very conservative, traditional. I think being Orthodox means like being correct or being right, something like that.
I thought it was like the most of that religion.
I think I think so, because certainly in Judaism, the Orthodox are a lot more
the most strict. They're like the most by the book.
Yeah,
and that's how I have always looked.
So
at it.
Yeah, and and being someone who doesn't dabble as much in these religions, so I was raised Catholic, but I was not raised Orthodox. I have known Orthodox priests, and I thought they were incredible people. I've only had a good impression, but I do understand the political impact that a church can have on a country's functioning. And so Greece is the first Orthodox country to legalize same-sex marriage. Greece legalized same-sex marriage and equal parental rights for same-sex couples on February 15th. It just happened. And the bill has drawn vehement opposition from the country's powerful Orthodox Church. So, they're the 16th European Union country to do this, to allow same-sex marriage, which is so amazing. They're the first Orthodox Christian nation to pass such a law, and Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis. Wow, I said that wrong. I'm just terrible with names. That's the Prime Minister, said there would be no second-class citizens and no children of a lesser God. I thought that was beautiful.
As it should be. As it should be.
It allows same-sex partners to adopt children and the same rights to both same-sex parents as legal guardians, but it doesn't give transgender people rights as parents. I was wondering, how does that work? I have to delve into that law a bit more because
it's taken this long to just get to this point, so I'm sure it's going to take a little bit longer.
You give the LGB but not the T? I don't know. It just seems like there's a little left out there. So Greece is still divided. Half of Greeks in opinion polls expressed support for same-sex marriage, yet most respondents also said they opposed allowing same-sex couples to adopt children. So people are still pretty, they're still pretty on the fence. So this is one of those instances where the politicians said, we're going to move forward with this because it's the right thing to do. Also, there's an EU, European Union LGBTQI survey, and they found that 74% of LGBT people in Greece often or always avoid holding hands with their same-sex partner. They found that 32% felt discriminated against at work, 33% had been harassed in the year before taking the survey, and 9% of LGBT in Greece were attacked in the 5 years before the survey. And it was about 10% for the EU as a whole. So it's as much as we feel like, we might feel comfortable, there's still a lot of discrimination out there. And going back to that minority stress model, the more discrimination you feel, the worse you'll feel about yourself, the more mental health issues you'll have. So when we have a more accepting and open world, it actually creates more mental health, more emotional health, more togetherness in our country. And, going back to that minority stress model, if you don't feel like you're marginalized or pushed out or cast aside, you're going to feel more together with other people. And that's going to, even if you do have already suffering from some kind of mental health issue, it's not going to be as exacerbated. It's going to be a little bit better, because when we believe other people have our back, we're going to do much better ourselves, no matter who we are. Okay, that brings us to the show for today. So thank you so much. This is Dr. Greg, Brian, and of course, Gus. Thank you, Gus. Until next time, be present, be flexible, and be kind.